Hello, brothers and sisters. We've just finished the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. Now we're starting the historical books of the Bible, and it has a name to it. We'll be studying about someone that you're going to hear about. But this story takes place in Israel, the promised land that they have now arrived at, and they've been living there for a while. So when we start the story, we're going to be talking about David. They, the people, wanted a king. God is sovereign and man is responsible, so God gave them a king. The title king brings to mind words like royalty, palaces, a crown, power to rule. For David, those are all words that he would have never thought about while he was growing up. Of all the Bible characters we read throughout the scriptures, we know the most about David. In his story, we find a young man who loves God, lives a life of worship, and pursues the heart of God with everything he had.
David was the youngest of 8 sons. He had 2 sisters. Think about that for a second. You can imagine what it was like growing up as the runt among the brothers. He was often pushed to the side by his siblings, even overlooked by his own father, Jesse, when the other brothers were assigned the really important work, the big boy work. David lived in a time where there was great upheaval in leadership among his people. There was tension in the air over King Saul and his lack of attention to God. David comes on the scene when the great prophet Samuel is tasked by God to select a new king. And when the sons of Jesse are all brought before Samuel, guess who is missing? You got it. Things changed quickly for David after he defeated Goliath, the great Philistine warrior. And today, it's hard to find anyone, Christian or non-Christian, who doesn't know the story of David defeating Goliath. Even though David was anointed to be king, it would take around 19 years for him to finally take the throne. In the meantime, King Saul had this love-hate relationship with David. He even tried to murder David 6 times. And then there was Jonathan, King Saul's oldest son, who was in line to one day take the throne. And amazingly, Jonathan and David become best friends, and it was Jonathan who protected his close friend from the wrath, the king's wrath. David lived in a constant state of presence before God, always ready to respond to the Almighty.
David was a worshiper. Many of his personal journal entries describe his love for God and how he revered God. Every time we gather as Northland Church, the words of David fall from our lips. We can't sing, "Blessed be your name," or "You never let go," 10,000 reasons, "Graves in the gardens," "The Lion and the Lamb," or even "Blessed Assurance" without taking a walk through the Psalms of David. Now, something interesting that sticks with me, a friend of mine says that while we sing the words of David, often we mostly only use what she refers to as his punchlines. Now, what she means, if you've ever read one of David's Psalms, is that between the "How great our God's" and the "Rejoice in the Lord's" is a story. The story of a man wrestling with his crazy life circumstances and often with his own sin. He didn't arrive at his great worship song hooks without paying a cost, without coming face to face with how big God is, how faithful and loving a Father, and how self-sacrificing a rescuer.
But it's not just about the triumphs that draw us to David, it's his humanity. David was someone who struggled greatly. His failures were disastrous, and some of his poor decisions literally ruined many people's lives. His story very much connects with our own sense of brokenness before God.
The scriptures teach us many incredible God lessons in the story of David, but it's hard to pick out one greater than this. God is impassioned about his people, and He loves when we go after His heart. That's who we want to be as disciples of Jesus. We want to live out the greatest commandment in powerful ways today, to love God with all our heart and soul and mind, and to love those around us the way Christ loved us. So step into the life of David. Step into the great stories told in the Scriptures. Even more so, step into the greatness of God. Let's learn what it means to go after God with all of our heart.